igcse Computer Science Paper 2, Validation and Verification. So, exam questions. Okay, let's begin. Describe giving a different example for each. The purpose of each validation checks used in programming. So there's a range check and with an example, length check with an example, type check and an example. Okay, so first range check. What is a range check? Range check is basically to check if a number is within a range. Like for example, if a number entered is like between 0 and 100. Like for example, a mark, a grade, like 100%, 75%. Okay, and an example. So, validation checks. So that is the description for a check. An example would be check if it is between 100 and 0 and 100. Now let's see. Test if the value input falls between a given upper bound and a given lower bound. So upper bound is 100 and lower bound is 0. And this example is if a month has to be input using an integer, it must be between 1 and 0 inclusive. Yeah, so a mark would be 0 between 0 and 100 inclusive. So, so that is range. Check. Now, length check is basically a string's length. Let's see. Uh, Data input is under is over or under a certain number of characters. Like for example, a name or family name should be between 2 and 30 characters. So the description is to test if the data input is under or over a certain number of characters. And here the example is given: an international telephone number can be longer than 15 digits. Oh no, sorry, I gave the wrong example for name, a family name. It's not the example. I shouldn't have given 2 and 30. This is a good example. An international telephone number can be no longer than 15 digits. So the data is over or under a certain number of characters. So that is length. An example would be this, or what does it mean by data? I think it means like what type of data? String or integer? I think it's a string. Yeah, because look, no longer than 15 digits. Yeah. Okay. And a type check is to see if the input is the correct data type. Oh yeah, okay. So example, age would not, a number of siblings would not be a real number. It won't be like 12.5 siblings. I mean 6.5 or 2.3. It's gonna be a whole number, right? So yeah, if the input is expecting integers to be entered, it will not permit a string to be entered. Yeah, so The type would be integers and not a string. Okay, next question. A programmer has written a routine to store the name, email address, and password of a contributor to a website's discussion group. The programmer has written a routine to store these things. A programmer has chosen to verify the name, email address, and password. So the name, email address, and password will be verified. Okay. Explain why verification was chosen and describe how the programmer would verify this data. So verification lets you read the answers. To ensure no changes are made on input, because the details do not have fixed values. Learns to validate, because there is no clear set of rules that can be used for validation. Um, Programmer has team store the name group. So these are the things being stored, and the programmer is going to verify these things. Explain why verification has been chosen and how this data would be verified by the programmer. I mean, how would the programmer verify this data? So for A, maximum is 4, and a 3 from this, and a 3 from this. Ensure no changes are made on input accuracy of transcription. The programmer could ask the contributor to type in each detail twice and then check that both values are equal. If they are not equal, then the input should be rejected. The programmer could ask the contributor to check the details on the screen and confirm that they are correct, same as the original, or change them. So that is 4A and this is 4B. Let's see, 4B. The programmer has also decided to validate the email address and the password. Describe validation checks that could be used. Email address, for example, it could be address. Then, yeah, format check. So it could check for at the symbol in the email address, and also a presence check if something is actually entered. Length check, not more than a certain number of, like 254 characters that exists. Wow. Okay, uniqueness check. Okay, password, for the password, this it could be length check, numbers and letters. Uniqueness check, not been used before. Presence check, length check, and numbers and letters. TC. Okay. For this question, describe using using an example the purpose of the following checks during data entry. Validation check, the purpose, and verification. So to test if the data entered is possible, reasonable, like a range check, test that data entered fits within specified values. Yes, and that is the example. And check if, the description is to check if the data entered is possible and reasonable. Okay. And for verification check, to test if the data input is the same as the data that was intended to be input. Okay. A double entry checks that a double entry check expects each item of data to be entered twice and compares both entries to check they are the same. Allow any correct verification check as example. So basically checks that the data intended to be like transferred has been transferred correctly. I mean, has been put by the user or been sent correctly, has been received correctly. Okay. And this question, explain the difference between a validation check and a verification check. Describe using an example how data could be verified on data entry. Okay. So validation checks whether data to be entered is possible, sensible, and a computer check. Verification checks that data entered is the data that was intended to be entered. Can be a human check, matches the source slash matches the source. Describe using an example how data could be verified on data entry. Describe using example how data could be verified on data entry. Um, Double entry. To a practical example, the data will be entered twice compared by the computer or by a human. If a if a this if a difference is found, then operator is asked to re-enter the data. If a discrepancy is found, okay, or visual verification. So to a practical example, so checking the human sees and knows if it's been entered correctly or not. Okay. Next question. For validation checks and for descriptions are shown below. Draw a line to link each validation check to the correct description. Presence check checks that some data has been entered, ensures, and range check, type check, length check. Range check is numbers between two given values are accepted. Let's see. Yes, numbers between two given values are accepted, and type check is data is of a particular specified type, and length check data contains an exact number of characters. Okay, length. It checks the length. Okay, and there is a program that stores the following data: employee ID, which was like two letters followed by four numbers. Sorry. So TY 4587, two letters, four numbers. Manager, whether the employee is a manager or not. Annual holiday, number of holidays, annual holiday. Pay grade, the employee's pay grade, which must be a single letter A to F. Okay. Holiday. Complete the following table to identify the most appropriate data type for each variable. Approved validation check for each variable. You must use different validation check for each variable. Okay. So variable data type and appropriate validation check. Employee ID. So it's unique. So data type. Let's see the answers. Oh, uniqueness. There's no uniqueness. Okay, anyway, data type is string. Cause this includes numbers and letters, string. Appropriate validation check, length check, or format check, presence check, and type check. Format check. Okay. Manager is Boolean, yes or no. Type check or presence check. Annual holiday, integer. So basically, it's a whole number. Type check, range check, presence check, and pay grade, a character, a single character presence. It will be checked, validated by presence check, length check, and type check. Either of these. Okay. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.